Hi, we're here with Jason Wagner. He's founder and CEO of West Coast Global Insurance Services. Jason, thank you for being here.
Appreciate it. Great to see you.
We're both in Cabo, but today Jason is traveling. We just decided to have this conversation via the internet. Jason, before we dive into all the details of insurance in Mexico, specifically for foreigners, right, that live or travel to Mexico, I'd love to hear a bit about your own story. How did you get into this line of work, and what led you to establish your company here in Los Cabos?
Excellent question. Yeah, so I grew up in Cabo San Lucas. My father opened a restaurant and bar in the early 80s. Many have heard of the Giggling Marlin. And so from a very young age, I was traveling down to Cabo San Lucas and fishing and enjoying the times as a young child down there and then growing up through the years. And when I lived down in Baja and was working for my father, he asked me for me to review all of his insurance. And I was going through it from Mexico auto insurance to Mexico commercial insurance and medical coverage. The list goes on and on, homeowners insurance. From that, I began my review. This was in the early 2000s. And I worked at the Giggling Marlin, and I decided it was time for me to venture off on my own and start my company. So I obtained my insurance licenses and already had my real estate license, but I went and obtained my insurance licenses and I started West Coast Global Insurance Services. And our focus ever since has been focused on expats, foreign nationals that have assets and need global health protection, whether they're traveling to Mexico for, periodic trips, or they're down there for a longer period of time, whether it's 6 months or longer, or they're permanent residents down in Mexico. So I found these solutions. We're now 2 decades later, and this has been 21 years. I've been focused on asset and health protection in Mexico, and primarily the Los Cabos location, where I grew up and where my roots are. That's where our focus is.
In these 21 years, it's easy to say that, but it's like 21 years is a long time. So congratulations, Jason. So in these more than 2 decades serving clients here in Baja, what do you think has changed the most in the insurance landscape since you started?
Fairly easy to answer that. When I first started, very limited products, products that weren't necessarily in English, products that didn't have clear deductible options for what somebody from the United States or Canada may be used to. So over the years, things progressed and there became more programs available focused on a individual that was American, let's say, or Canadian that spoke English and needed to see their policy in a courtesy translation in English so they could be able to review it. I think that's probably the biggest change. The servicing from the carriers in Mexico has definitely gotten better over the years. We've experienced some catastrophic events such as Hurricane Odile in 2014. So I think that was a wake-up moment for a lot of the insurance carriers needing to make sure that there were more resources in places like Los Cabos. That's primarily the biggest difference that I've seen. It's just like more catered insurance products that I've also been very helpful to bring to market because I'm listening to my clients, I'm seeing what their insurance needs are, and we've got to find solutions for them. So there's definitely more products available now. And the insurance in Mexico is different than it is in the United States. The terms and conditions are different, and these are all very important points that anybody that's coming to Mexico needing insurance, that they understand that there are some slight differences for the most part, and the laws are within the Republic of Mexico. And you want to make sure that when you're filling out applications, you are filling out applications and or questionnaires thoroughly and making sure all the characteristics of whatever that item is that's being insured is properly listed, so it's transferred over to the insurance policy.
I think that it's very useful for your clients that you are also bicultural, right? Because growing up here, you have a very good understanding of both cultures. I'm Mexican from Mexico City. I really understood the difference in terms of insurance the culture of insurance. When I lived for a brief period in the United States, over there, people like have a strong culture of insuring their assets. Like everything is insured. Even like you can buy a pet insurance for when your pet gets sick, you go to the vet and you have insurance for your pet. Here in Mexico, at least in my case, I really insure the least possible things that I can. Like I have health insurance and my car, and that's it. But the question is, do you see these kind of cultural differences in your work, and what do you think about them? Do you find them interesting, and does it kind of influence and impact your daily work in the insurance industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got to adapt, and it's all very interesting to me. I've been embedded in this industry for over 21 years now, and there are some definite cultural differences. We do cater to Mexican nationals, and we've got products for Mexican nationals. And maybe those are more in line with things, insurance policies that you've seen, Alejandro. But when it comes to homeowners insurance and auto insurance, like you said, and it's interesting, a lot of people, I got to get my car insured. Well, what about your health? Your health is pretty important. And what happens in the event where there ends up being an onset of a medical condition? And now you've got to tap into your reserves and your savings account. Or, for sequence to this conversation, if you have a frequent traveler that's down in Baja and they have Medicare, for example, and they need to make sure that they've also got proper coverage for their travels internationally. And securing an accident, illness, travel medical plan is just so critical, Not having that coverage, I've heard the horror stories over the years. They're not fun, where somebody didn't have, a medical policy in place. And, I think a lot of what I do, it really is education. And like you said earlier on your side, it's by the least amount of insurance that you need just to be protected. Whereas there's the other side of the spectrum that says, I want to have all the insurance in place because I don't want to have exposure and gaps in coverage where there could be something that sneaks up on me and then cripples my estate or my fortune. So you've got many walks of life, Alejandro, and it really comes down to understanding my clients and what their individual needs are and what's most important to them. I'm not here to force insurance on anybody. That's not what I do, but I need to be able to understand where there is exposure so we can find the product and introduce it to that individual and say, hey, did you know this was available? If you didn't, take a look at this, take a review on this. Let us know if you've got additional questions. So again, to circle back on that, I think more than anything, it's about the education side and where maybe on your end, you didn't know the products even existed, and I think that could possibly be part of that side, of just making sure that people know about what is available out there.
Yeah, definitely. And a couple of years ago, I had a health situation, and I sure was glad that I was insured because it was very expensive. But since we're talking about health, let's think of someone who comes for vacation here. She or he, they're just spending, let's say, a week here. And I'm under the impression that travel insurance covers emergencies or some type of travel insurance, no? But at what point does this specific person who's coming for a few days to enjoy their vacations, do they need to plan for something more robust, something that protects them more?
Okay. So when it comes to the frequent traveler, it really falls back on the types of policies that exist. And when it comes to accident and illness, travel medical protection, we're talking about an onset of a medical condition. So we're not talking about necessarily, God forbid, cancer, something that's ongoing that lasts for a long period of time. So this is where you're on vacation. You got to make sure that, here's an example. Someone steps out of a taxi cab and doesn't have a good fitting on their stance. And I've had a client that fell and broke their hip. So it's making sure that you've got a plan in place that can meet these types of medical scenarios that may come down. You never know. I mean, that's the thing. Insurance is one of those things where you don't want it until you need it. And when you need it, you really need it, and you're happy that you have it. And the thing with accident, illness, travel, medical protection, and this is probably an area that we educate the most on, we get calls about this all the time, is just making sure that clients understand what's available for them and the type of travel patterns they have. So the plans are basically broken down into single trip plans and multi-trip plans. Single trip plan can be, I'm headed to Cabo for 5 days, I need a plan. Awesome. What's really cool about these plans too is just with the simple call to my office, we can set, once we understand your travel patterns and a little bit more information, we're able to send you a direct link, a buy now link. And you're able to click on the link in a matter of a couple minutes, type in the details, how long you're going to be traveling to Mexico or to Europe or to wherever you're going outside your original home country, and be able to purchase that policy in a few easy steps online. So that's available. So in regards to your question, when we talk about when that person should maybe get more coverage, in these plans, you can decide how much coverage you want. So you can choose, I want $50,000 or I want $1 million. And it can change based on age demographics, right? So if we have somebody that's 85 years old, there's going to be limited products, more limited products. And we do have products that can serve that age demographic, not a problem. And then on the other side, we have multi-trip. And this would be for a frequent traveler, somebody that's got a vacation home down in Cabo, and they're going down to Cabo either a few times a year, they're going down a few times a month, and then they're bouncing back to the States to handle business. There's multi-trip plans, and those plans can serve those types of clients that are traveling for 30 days out of their home country, 60 days, 70 days, 90 days. And I'm talking from a spectrum of different types of policies. It all comes down to citizenship, age, travel patterns are more or less what is most important that we need to gather to understand what type of plan we need to offer.
So I understand that you need as much information about the specific person as possible, no? But just in general, what about someone who lives here, let's say 7 months or 6 months out of the year, and 6 months in, let's say, Canada or the United States? They are insured over there. Maybe they're wondering, why should I also get another type of insurance when for the time I'm in Mexico? I'm already insured. What would you tell someone like that?
Great question. Really, really great question. And the reason why that's so important is what I would tell that client is I would say, go call your insurance company back home and find out what coverage is offered in the event you have an emergency or there's some type of onset of a medical condition while you're traveling outside your home country. Many times they're going to find that there's little to no coverage. And that's where an agency and myself, West Coast Global Insurance Services, comes in, because that's the type of coverage that we offer. We offer international medical coverage. And again, based on the travel patterns. So let's say that there's no travel patterns. Let's say that this is a person that lives down in Mexico and they're down living there, they're a resident even, and they're down there 6 months or more. That changes their qualifications now. And it always comes down to, what does the client qualify for? If they are considered an expat now, we've just opened up a whole new product suite that we can introduce to this client. And we have a lot of clients that come to us and are saying, you know what, I'm not worried about the small stuff. To go to the doctor in Mexico, it doesn't cost that much. A cut on a finger type of idea, or someone's not feeling good. They've got gripa. With that in mind, just making sure that we talk to them, understand what their needs are, and what they are. Where I'm going with this is what they're asking for is a lot of times a catastrophic plan. Catastrophic plan gives them protection where, God forbid, something major happened. There's an accident. Someone steps out of the taxi cab and breaks a hip. and or somebody has something more serious, that they have coverage that's going to be there to protect them when they're living in a foreign country, whether it's Mexico, it's Europe, wherever it may be.
Health is, of course, usually one of the biggest concerns, no, when it comes to insurance, but also property, right? So more and more people are buying here and sometimes relocating here permanently. The real estate market here continues to grow every year. And the thing is that we are here in Cabo, in Baja, very exposed to the elements, right? Like that's something that me coming from the mainland, though we do have earthquakes there, but here you feel exposed to the elements, to the ocean, and to in a way that I hadn't ever experienced. Which is nice until until a hurricane or a storm comes, no? So the question is from your perspective, where do foreign residents most often under insure their homes or their condos? What are like their blind spots, and what are the consequences and the ways you can help them to be aware of those blind spots?
Okay, so when it comes to homeowners insurance in Mexico, and we help many, many clients with this line of insurance, the blind spots are really making sure that the characteristics of their property are mentioned, that are notified, that are actually on their insurance policy. In reviews of policies that may not have been paid out correctly or not paid out at all from an insurance carrier, most of the time it's because the insurance policy was not written correctly. And there was a client that was underinsured, or there was an exclusion, or there was zero coverage for something that client actually thought was important, but on the policy, there was no coverage there. So I think that's really the most important part. And what I've done to help with this is I've created an online questionnaire for all lines of insurance. And for my homeowners clients, we send you out a link. You'll click on the link, and 21 years of questions and answers and characteristics and square feet and understanding what these questions are. And every carrier kind of has their own nuance, what they cover, what they don't cover. And some cover fixed outdoor property, others don't offer any outdoor property. And so really just getting down to the nitty gritty on these questions and understanding the characteristics and reviewing photos of the home and so forth are really important.
Also, I've been reading and analyzing comments on Facebook groups that are of the kind of all the questions that people have about Cabo when they come and things that they find, other things that they're curious about. And there's one that comes up a lot, and it's about tours and boats and activities. So we're focusing back on the tourist that comes only for a few days, right? They often assume that the operators carry liability insurance. So when they rent a boat or an ATV, or when they go out on a fishing trip, but how does coverage actually work in those cases? Should you buy or supplemental protection, or do you just trust in the operator? What do you do?
Definitely don't trust in the operator, right? I mean, these are types of situations where if you are going out on an ATV tour or to the Cabo Arch, Land's End, and taking in the scenic views that we have here in Cabo San Lucas, this is where an accident and illness travel medical protection policy comes in and is perfectly suited for this type of situation, where if there's an onset of some medical emergency, can you imagine? Can you imagine being out on a tour and all of a sudden something happens and now your loved one's getting rushed to the hospital, and then you enter into the hospital and they're saying, well, how are you going to pay for this? What are you going to do? And you're going to sit there and go, well, I hope the operator of the boat had insurance. No way. That's not happening. Not the way I'm thinking about wanting to make sure that you've got some type of peace of mind. And the way that I look at this is that, you plan these trips and they're expensive, right? You plan a trip to Mexico for, maybe they're not all expensive, but a couple $1,000s, let's say, and up. And consider accident and illness travel medical protection a safety net, an investment in your trip. And it now just becomes one of those expenses where you're like, hey, I've got to get medical insurance because you never know what's going to happen. And I just talked to a coworker and their dad had a heart attack when they were on a cruise ship or they were traveling to Cabo or wherever they were going. And in those types of situations, to have to rely on someone else is a scary situation. But if you can take that into your own hands and say, you know what, I'm going to spend the $20 that it could be, depending on your age bracket, or it's $100, or it's a couple $100, depending on what type of coverage you want and the deductible. That peace of mind is, I believe, everything in regards to the what ifs, because you never know.
Yeah, definitely. Focusing back again on the people that are relocating here, which is happening more and more. Last week I was speaking with the sales director at Querencia, and he was mentioning that he definitely sees that trend, like young families moving here full time with their kids and everything. So in those situations, I guess people are mostly focused on visas, banking, finding a home. Where do you think insurance should fit in that list of priorities? And in your experience, when people relocate here, what are the biggest oversights that they make? Things that they should be probably doing first on their list, and sometimes they push them back for later, and then maybe trouble arises.
Yes. So we've always got to put family first, right? And when we put family first, you've got to think about the what ifs, and especially moving into a foreign territory. Yes, getting your visa is important, making sure you have your Mexican driver's license if you're going to be full-time down in Mexico, those types of ideas and your visas. It's just important to think about, again, the what ifs, and insurance should absolutely be part of these thought process. And again, what it comes down to, Alejandro, is it comes down to education. And if I was in the place of a new family and or a retiree that was deciding to move to a foreign country, whether you visited there or not, to find out what's available, what is available, what's important for me to continue to enjoy my life and my family, and to keep us out of harm's way, to make sure that we continue to have peace of mind, and to make sure that our savings account doesn't get drained in the event that you purchase a home and another Hurricane Odile comes through, and then all of a sudden your $1 million home, or whatever the value is on that home, you've got extreme damage, excessive damage, that then you're thinking, oh my gosh, now I've got to pay 100% out of pocket. So that's really what it comes down to. That's the homeowner side, right? But what about the medical side? And this is the side that, you tapped into earlier, is just making sure that you understand what's available. And there are local programs, of course, and everybody can research that and look into, if that makes the most sense for your family. But where we focus, West Coast Global Insurance Services, we focus with private healthcare. These are international programs, and they've weathered the storms. They're going to be here to make sure that claims get paid when medical scenarios come to existence, and they're covered, and just making sure that that an individual has the proper protection, and they're not blindsided by, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that existed, and now I need it. So I think that's, again, it comes down to education. And I like I was mentioning earlier, this is where I come in, and where we really want to make sure that clients understand the scope of the exposures that are down there, like the elements, like you said earlier.
Jason, yeah, thank you so much for all your insights today. Is there a piece of advice. I mean, you've given us a lot, and I think that the main one is do your research, become educated, know your options. But other than that, is there any specific piece of advice that you would give to someone moving to Mexico who's trying to figure out their insurance for the first time?
Join communities, talk to, your real estate agent. They're going to know, they're going to have a pulse on what's going on in Mexico and maybe different communities to be joining. And Facebook is one of those very powerful places where you can learn a lot. There's also a lot of garbage that's out there as well, but finding the communities, and especially moving into a new place like Cabo San Lucas, there's so many wonderful communities. And when you can really tap into those types of resources, because the questions you have, they've already been asked and answered perhaps by the community, and just communicating with those individuals and asking what their experiences are, I think is a very powerful, suggestion to have.
Yeah, good advice, good suggestion. So Jason Wagner, founder, CEO of West Coast Global Insurance Services. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and I hope we take this conversation up again in the future.
You just let me know, Alejandro. I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.